I feel like a lot of folks have underestimated how good Windblown is looking. What you all have seen in the base demo is maybe 1% of what's available even in the early access release of this game. I'm Veedotme and I post a lot about roguelike games, and this one in particular has my undivided attention. I see the cooldowns rolling. Yeah, oh my god, the cooldowns. These are like legendary affixes. Those are so sick. Okay. Oh, and the freeze stays? If you don't know what this game is, this is Motion Twin's newest game. You can see some of that Dead Cells DNA in here, with a lot more pieces to it than I've seen in Dead Cells. In fact, there's stuff in here that I wish we had gotten in Dead Cells. What you've probably seen so far is the demo footage of the game. There's so much more beyond that, even for the basic mechanics that you've gotten thus far. So what I'm gonna show you today is why I think Windblown is deserving of its praise. Oh my god, my life! And probably the biggest thing that you'll see starting off when looking at Windblown is that it looks completely different from Dead Cells. Dead Cells is a 2D action platformer roguelike, a roguevania if you will, and Windblown is a 3D isometric roguelike. What that means is that the camera perspective is different. You're not doing that left to right platformer style game. A big part of Windblown from inception is that it needs to have a gameplay feel that goes beyond just fighting enemies. We need level design here. So in Windblown, we have these fully fleshed out biome stages. A big part of this game is all about movement. You'll often see characters zip around the screen. Every time they go over a platform or a gap, there's like a reset on your dash. And it does that so you're actually moving through the environment very quickly. It almost reminds me of playing Sonic the Hedgehog or Sonic Generations if you want to be specific, on how the movement actually occurs in a stage, but you're doing combat in between that movement. You're also going to find secrets along the way. For example, there may be a treasure chest hidden behind a waterfall. Secret! Or there may be a platform that's slightly below the stage that leads you to a whole nother fight, and that might reward you with currency or some kind of power-up. Unlike games like Hades, where you're fighting one box to one box at a time, where there's really only a door that separates between the two, and that determines your entire route, I actually enjoy having real level design, offering me more immersion to the game, and to be fair, I think it's really fun to zip around arenas. But being an isometric game isn't all about just being able to see a character in 3D space, it's all about what you can do in that 3D space compared to 2D. And going back to Dead Cells, which, sorry, I'm gonna reference a lot because this is Motion Twin's game, Dead Cells 2D has always come with limitations. For example, the easiest thing I can talk about is a sword. A sword can slash, and that's basically it. If you think about it, in 2D space, you have horizontal slash, vertical slash, and nothing to really dictate who you're attacking or who the priority is. In 3D space, however, the devs can be a lot more complex and certainly more ambitious in what they think they can do with that same sword. For example, you might do simple slashes in front of you. You could be slashing, hold down the button, then like leap forward and hit the further enemy. You could maybe swing 360 degrees around you. There's a lot of stuff you can do in 3D that just cannot be done in 2D. Now, of course, besides all the level stuff, one of the biggest parts about Dead Cells was the variety of combat. Having different weapons that can do a lot of different things. That DNA does exist in Windblown as well. Again, let's focus on swords. We may have one sword that's a 3-hit combo, the last hit is a critical, and whenever it does its alter attack, which we'll get into later, you do a constant flurry of slashes in front of you while you can do any other attacks you have. Another sword has a 5-hit combo, where after you do the full combo, you have critical hits for a longer duration. This thing also has a held attack that will launch you forward, slamming down on whatever enemy is further away. and then its alter turns you into a saw blade that has invulnerability frames to it so you can dodge through attacks. And then, sorry, you gotta keep up with me here, the other sword in the game is slower. It stuns enemies on hit. Its alter attack sends a earth-bending wave of rocks forward, stunning anything it touches. But as I said, in Dead Cells, we've always been known for weapon variety, so not everything in Windblown is a simple sword. There are kunai, ninja stars, even a crossbow that plays like a rhythm game. There's even a paintbrush that applies glue to monsters, but it stabs like a spear. And finally, I can say that parrying is in the game. They have a parry shield that allows you to block and parry attacks. So we have a lot of creative things we can do with the gameplay, and from what I've played so far, everything feels very satisfying to use, and there's a lot of different applications depending on which weapon I'm using. My gerbil got that thing on him. Speaking of gameplay, let me give you a super brief explanation of the alter system. Compared to other games where you have two different weapons, what real reason do you have to press both buttons? Ideally, you want to get through the game only using one weapon ever. In Windblown, they've put in a system that incentivizes you to use both, where your first weapon will activate a trigger telling you should press the other weapon. For example, my paintbrush here does a simple combo that ends in stabs. Once this little symbol shows up above my head, I have the chance to activate my alter attack, which will fire out my second weapon special attack. There's even gifts that revolve around alter, including my favorite one, which allows you to do back-to-back alter attacks, completely changing what it means to have two different weapons. But don't forget, as much as we all like to talk about combat, this is a roguelike game after all, and we gotta focus on the most important part of the roguelike, build creation. Back in Dead Cells, build creation was really all about the color you chose, the weapon you took, and then some kind of mutation to support that. That's really about it when it comes to build variety. Windblown brings that up a notch. Rather than having mutations, we now have gifts, and this gift will dictate the build and evolve as you play through the game. Well, all that means is that previously we had very straightforward build design where it was just a weapon, and then maybe you do bonus damage to a monster that's on fire or poisoned. Windblown takes that a step deeper, where you have the weapon, again, might be doing bonus damage to that enemy, but then fire or poison or bleed, whatever that perk is, does more stuff, extra stuff, when you pick up more perks. And I think that's a big piece to what you aren't gonna see in a lot of YouTube videos, or even in the base demo of the game that you have, and that's the gift system and how that evolves throughout the game. Most gifts actually come from a blueprint that you'll unlock over time. Once you unlock that blueprint, the gift will start showing up, and then anything related to that mechanic will start showing up too. Echo is a blueprint that you'll find that is a gift once you unlock it. Echo is a mechanic that will replicate the damage you deal. You hit a monster one time, and then it gets hit again as if you swung twice. Once you get that Echo, you'll find other gifts that now revolve around Echo. For example, Critical Echo will, you guessed it, make Echoes do crits. Of course, that will increase the damage of the Echo, but now anything else I have in my build that revolves around critical damage, for example, cooldown reduction every time I land a crit, will now work off the Echo. Let's try another example here. You unlock Freeze by getting the Ice Grenade blueprint. Nothing related to Freeze will really start to show up until you get the blueprint unlocked. Here we have a gift called Intense Freeze. Shattering a frozen enemy deals some damage and then explodes around the target. Pretty simple, right? But then on top of that, you can get Deep Freeze, where you shatter that monster, it actually stays frozen for additional seconds, and notice the wording here, it says Teams Freeze. We'll get into that a little bit later. So with these two things together, I can actually make a freeze and shatter build, where my whole goal is to use Ice Bomb, freeze the monster, and then detonate it with my powerful grenade for a giga crit, killing really anything it touches. If this was Dead Cells, yeah, we have freeze, and yeah, we have bonus damage to frozen target, but that's about it. There's really no build there. Windblown is trying to double or even triple down on build making. So by the time you actually have something put together, you can explain it in a way that doesn't sound like I just took the strongest weapon I could. It's like I actually made something with tangible synergies that I can explain to you. And I really feel like that's the true essence of a roguelike game. Yeah, we have randomized monster layout and randomized maps, maybe even randomized buffs, but what really boils down to the roguelike experience, is my build different than I had in the previous run? And that's the true roguelike experience, at least for me. I think Windblown has that. One other thing that Windblown has that Dead Cells could never have, not because the devs didn't want to, but because it was simply not in the architecture for the game, and that's multiplayer. I honestly feel like in 2024, multiplayer is almost mandatory for roguelikes, especially in this genre. Even if it's not the premier gameplay experience, I do think people playing games with others is more important now than ever before. So Windblown does have multiplayer in it. You can have up to 3 people playing together, and of course you have all the fun of simply blowing up monsters at the same time as your buddies. However, Windblown does have multiplayer features that really flesh out that experience. A big part of that does come from build making. So for example, you can invest in something called goo. Goo is a mechanic that will snare a monster in place, and they take some like poison damage over time. If you took goo, that monster is snared for everybody. You can do things like goo spreads to nearby enemies, etc., while your buddies are building bonus damage to goo, or critical hits against goo targets. I even did something with our buddy Loot or Die, where we played multiplayer while he invested in fire, I invested into bleed, and all of his fire synergies were working on me because we're both working together. Even with the shield I talked about earlier, you can taunt enemies with it by holding down the block button. That means you can play the tank using the shield to taunt while all of your buddies are attacking the monster from behind with ranged attacks. Even the shops themselves have multiplayer mechanics where both you and your buddies feed gold or health into a shop, and you can decide, how much money or how much health each person spends. It's definitely a cool system, something I'll experiment with a little bit more. Right now, my focus is on single player. If you don't know me, I like to make guides and stuff like that for roguelikes. So when Windblown comes out, we're gonna be doing that day 1 guaranteed. If you wanna know more about the game, leave a comment letting me know what feature you wanna hear more about. And of course, if you wanna see more of the game, here's a couple of vids on the screen that you can check out and see what the game looks like beyond the demo that you've currently played.